Five, four, three, two, one. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to part 2 in our 3-part series of strategic planning. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining our Flawless Execution webinar series. This month, we'll talk about strategic planning and how you can execute your strategic planning sessions. The third seminar is going to be about how to implement and execute that strategic plan that you create. Now remember, we always leave time for questions and answers at the end, so have your questions ready, and at the end, we'll discuss those questions and provide answers for you. This is me. My call sign is Thor. My name is Joel Neeb. Feel free to reach out to me at @JoelThorNeeb and ask any questions regarding the material that we're about to present. We answer all the questions that were asked, and we generally get 30 or 40 questions following every single one of these sessions. We start off every one of our presentations with this same statistic. We only accomplish 33% of the things that we say we're going to do. And this isn't our statistic. This comes from a great Harvard Business Review article where they followed around publicly traded companies. They listened to what they said they were going to do. They compared that to what they actually accomplished. And they found out that 67% of the time, they didn't accomplish what they set out to do. We call that difference the execution gap. My role at Afterburner is to minimize that execution gap. My role as a fighter pilot was to minimize that execution gap so that we could be as effective and safe as possible while flying through the skies. This is me. I'm the president of Afterburner. We come out of Atlanta, Georgia. I've been the president for 1 year. I've been with Afterburner for 4 years. Before that, I flew fighter planes and trainer planes in the Air Force for 17 years. More than 2,500 missions where we supported flying the President of the United States around the globe, and trained more than 2,000 new pilots in the Air Force during that time frame. More importantly, I was embedded with a Silicon Valley tech company in 2015, where we took the techniques that we used to build elite teams in a high-stakes environment and helped the corporations do exactly that same thing. If you joined us last time, you got to hear about the steps to prepare for your strategic planning session. And I said it wasn't easy. There's some heavy lifting that needs to go on in the 2 weeks leading up to your strategic planning session. And as a reminder, folks, there are only 5 business weeks left in 2016. In 5 business weeks, it'll be January 1st. So time is short. It's time now to begin planning for your planning session so that you have the right strategic objectives on January 1st. In order to do that, make sure that you're learning from the past, that you've identified what worked and what didn't in 2016. You got leadership buy-in. You have a common shared mental model for what success looks like and how you're going to execute your planning session. Answer the question, who are we? What's the type of culture that you're going to identify with? What are the values that you're going to put forward to achieve the strategic plan you create in your session? Employ open planning. That means we bring in all the key stakeholders that are a part of the execution phase. And those stakeholders need to be your strategic leaders as well as your middle managers, because they're the ones that are going to communicate and implement your plan, and some frontline operators, the ones who are closest to the problem, closest to the challenge, because we're going to get some great insights and great buy-in from them as well. These are the steps that we need to take to ensure that our planning session is effective. Let's talk about each one of these. Number 1, stay strategic. It's one of the most challenging things to do. If you've done one of our sessions in the past, you probably focused on a mission, and that's very tactical. There's a difference between strategy and tactics. We want to have a strategic influence so that we can see where we're going as a team and then pick the right tactics from that strategy. Let's talk about what an example might be in the business world. So everybody knows that in the early part of this century, Zappos came along and took over the shoe industry in an online role. And they had a strategy of redefining the online shopping experience through fanatical customer support. They did something a little strange. They said, we're going to approach this market with really strong customer support, and that's how we're going to sell more shoes in an online environment. That was their strategy. Their tactics to accomplish that were to hire for personality. They said that we're going to only hire people that are going to be willing to provide that strong customer support. They celebrated customer support. They had a 6-hour customer support call, and they celebrated that fact versus actually firing the person, which they would have done at any other company. And they lived the wow philosophy. They taught their team members how to create customer delight. Those are the tactics that supported their overarching strategy. So when you get your teams together and you're planning for 2017 and what the objectives are, I want you to focus on what's strategic and not tactical. I want you to focus the conversation on those things that are going to be guiding North Stars for your organization. I want you to think about how strategy is going to define your tactics, because they are connected. When done right, your strategy will dictate what tactics you're going to choose. And I want you to think of picking what objectives we're going to achieve in 2017 and beyond, and not on how. And if you do this right, trust me that you're going to have to remind your team members in the planning session again and again, hey folks, make it more strategic. Because as soon as you figure out what you want to accomplish, the temptation is going to be to go back to how we're going to do it. How in Q1 we can take on this particular mission or project and be successful. Resist that temptation. Keep taking that conversation up a level and keep it strategic. High definition destination, staying strategic. This is what it looks like as you execute. We have a 3-year destination for the organization. We plan this out in great detail so that we can create the supporting campaigns. And if you think of these campaigns lasting about a year in duration, now we understand how the high definition destination connects to activity in 2017. Build out those missions from your campaign, but you're not going to actually identify the how and those missions during your strategic campaign planning session. During the strategic campaign planning session, the only thing you're going to build is the high definition destination in your campaign, those annual objectives that you're going to pursue. Later on, you're going to build out the missions that will support them. Part 2, focus the dialogue. It's really challenging to do in the strategic planning session. This is heavy lifting. Trust me when I say this is one of the most challenging things that we do and we facilitate as an organization. It can be overwhelming for you. It can be overwhelming for your organization as you put them through this planning process. If you listened to me in the last session, you brought along all your key stakeholders. You brought along all your functional leaders. And it's going to be too many people to be constructive. You probably brought 20 people into the room because you need all of their buy-in. You need their inputs to be effective. The challenge is this. That's going to be more people than a constructive team will allow. The best team size is going to be between 5 and 9 people. Less than 5 people, and we're going to find that we're capacity constrained, meaning we're going to wish we had more people on the team. More than 9 people, and now all of a sudden the extroverts are dominating the conversation. We're not having effective dialogue. The introverts are checking out, and they open up their computers, and they're checking their email. We need to level that playing field so that we can have a constructive conversation and create equal voices for the team members. In order to do that, I highly recommend you bring a third-party facilitator. In other words, somebody else that's going to keep the dialogue focused, keep the team on task during that planning session. The reason I advocate for a third-party facilitator is because you don't want to have your leader leading the discussion either. It's going to feel like that leader is pushing his or her agenda onto the team. So bring somebody in from HR, bring an Afterburner team member along, whoever it is, make sure they're an unbiased third-party facilitator to direct the conversation. Think about how you're going to level the discussion playing field. As I said earlier, we've got 20 people on the team. Some are extroverts, some are introverts. They react very differently as team members. The introverts are going to wait to mull over that conversation and come up with the best answer. The extroverts are just going to shout it out. So we need to consider how we're going to be effective and level that playing field for those team members. Two great techniques that I use. Number one, use the Crawford split method. We call this team storming. Instead of just raising your hand and throwing out the answer and allowing the extroverts to dominate, we're going to have you write it down, and then we share all the information at the end and have that as discussion points. That avoids groupthink, and that levels the playing field. Part two, break your group up into subgroups. So think about putting 3, 4, maybe 5 people on a specific task in the planning session and then bringing them back together afterwards. Create rules of engagement, create a parking lot, and then schedule, and show that schedule on the wall. So rules of engagement are going to make it very clear how the dialogue is going to be facilitated. The parking lot is a critical element that allows you to say, hey, that's a great idea. That's something we need to capture. I don't want to lose that. But it's not relevant to our 2-day planning session. And so we're going to need to put that on the wall in the form of a parking lot, and then we'll revisit it later. And then last, post a schedule so the entire team has a sense of urgency around what they're going to accomplish over the next 2 days. Here's a sample schedule that we use when we facilitate these planning sessions. On day one, it's really about getting the introductions out of the way, everybody understanding the schedule, the rules of engagement, the agenda. We'll talk about the debrief results, what we had happen in 2016, what we're going to pivot from. We're going to define the future in the form of what success looks like in the long term. And we're going to talk about what the environment's going to be that we're going to have to navigate. What are those threats? What are the resources? What are the lessons learned that are going to stop us in the form of threats or help us in the form of resources? And then finally, identify the critical leverage points. More on that later, but I want to be able to make maximum impact with minimal effort. Day two is where we review and edit that high-definition destination, identify the campaigns we're going to pursue, create your identity. Who are we? What are our values going to be throughout 2017 and beyond? And then once you're complete, brief this back out to the rest of the team so it's front of mind and they can understand what they've created over the two-day session. Number three, begin with the end in mind. You are in the future. Here's how we facilitate this. We take all the team members, take them out of the room. We tell them, come back in, and when you come back in, you're in 2019. You are literally in the future. I want you to put your phones away, put your laptops away. Don't have any discussions about challenges that you're facing right now. I want you to talk about things exclusively from a 2019 perspective and describe to me what that world looks like in exquisite detail. The only way we can do that is by breaking it down into key areas. Michael Porter has brought this, the 15 key areas out, the grandfather of strategy. And look at these 15 key areas and determine which ones you want to focus on, whether it's finance, culture, market branding, entrepreneurship and innovation, and determine how you're going to approach each of these key areas from a strategic perspective. We create alignment today by defining tomorrow. So this is where I told you the flow looks like from a top-down perspective. High-definition destination builds out the strategic campaigns, builds out the missions. But here's what often happens to us. Our clients come to us and say, we just got this mission, this random mission that we want to pursue. It's 6 to 8 weeks long. It's the closest alligator to the canoe. And they don't have any context in the form of campaigns and high-definition destination that they're going to pursue it for. In other words, they finish with this mission, and sometimes they're even successful, and they say, why did we accomplish this? Why was this so important, and we didn't pursue the other 19 things that we could have along the way? They're lacking the context, and that's why it's so important that you build out that clear picture for them. You build out that alignment from the top down. That allows them to understand not only why they're accomplishing the mission, but what the next follow-on mission is going to be as well. What is the ensuing project going to be so that we continue with our strategy? Number four, identify your critical leverage points. Think of this as those places where you can get maximum impact with minimal effort. What we recommend you do is create an influence map of your network. Think about all the resources you have, all the channel partners, all the different functional groups within your organization, and map that out. Look for critical leverage points where you can impact the entire system by touching those specific nodes. And then think about how difficult it would be, how much effort you're going to have to put in to be effective. So, for example, let's take this spaghetti chart, this eye chart we've got going here. This is your system. This is where your organization or where your team lives within the environment. And each one of these nodes represents your channel partners or your sales team or your marketing team, your product, the technology, innovation. And what you're looking at is where are the nodes that I can apply minimal effort and affect the entire system. And from this example, obviously, the green ones aren't going to be that significant. If I touch a green node and I affect a green node, it's not going to affect much of that system. But if I touch those red nodes, if I take out that red node, that's going to affect a lot of other areas and a lot of other nodes within that system. That's what we're looking to accomplish. Here's an example from the business world. Once you understand what your influence map looks like, I want you to think about what are those things I want to impact to be successful. So Apple had to do this when they released the iPod. And they said, we could go after anybody in the music industry. We could go after a genre. We could go after a time period. We could just say everybody's on our list, or we could go after a few. And if you remember, they went after Lenny Kravitz and U2 to promote the iPod. They said, we're going to have an iTunes library where you can only get the music through us. We're going to have university students, not high school, not mid-30s, their target demographic, but university students, because we see that as a critical leverage point. It's going to be released at Christmas, so it can coincide with Christmas gifts. And we're going to have good earphones, good design, a price point of $350, and we'll partner with Sony to make that happen. They looked at all the things that they could do and identified the things that would have the maximum impact to determine what they should do to follow their strategy. Number 5, simplicity beats complexity. The world is changing. We all are living in a VUCA environment. That's the word of the decade. VUCA means volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And what we're really saying is the world is changing faster than it ever has in the past. We used to be able to enjoy 7 years of profitability from a product. You create a product, you create the new iPod, and you can enjoy 7 years of profitability there was once upon a time. These days, because of globalization, because of the competitive nature of the market now, because of the information accessibility, it's going down to 3 years. So when you build a product, 2 years and 6 months, you better have another product waiting in the wings, because after that, competition is going to be so strong, you're going to be marginalized. We need to be able to stay ahead of the rate of change. We need to be able to take that complexity and minimize it. So as you execute your planning session and you're determining what success looks like for your team in 3 years and what they're going to pursue in 2017, I want you to remember that the ultimate goal is to simplify, simplify, simplify. Here's what that means. Maximum of 10 key areas. No more than 10 of Michael Porter's areas that you're actually going to pursue in this conversation. Maximum of 7 critical leverage points. Maximum of 3 to 5 campaigns. Those campaigns are your annual goals. Here's what you're going to be tempted to do. You're going to finish with this 2-day session. You're going to build all this alignment. You're going to hear about 25 great ideas from all the different team members, and you're going to launch 19 new campaigns in 2017, and you're going to trick yourselves into believing that you're going to accomplish all those things in that period of time. It's not going to happen. You're going to do none of it because you don't have the focus, you don't have the simplicity of a plan that allows you to keep your team members engaged in a few things. Remember, whatever you build has to be quickly communicated to the entire organization and allow them to address their priority towards it and emphasize it on January 1st. The deliverable, what you create out of this 2-day session, should fit on 4 slides, meaning everything that you build should be able to be presented in a 4-slide format. You're saying, Thor, these are my strategic leaders. These are the most important people in our organization getting together, having a conversation about what success looks like in 3 years, and we're going to put all their answers down on 4 slides. Absolutely. That's exactly what I want you to do because it needs to be easily consumable by the entire team. You're going to put this on posters, and if you work with us, you'll do 2 posters. You'll put it all over your organization. Everyone understands what success looks like and where the organization is going from a strategic perspective, and those 2 posters are going to communicate that. You can't have a long, drawn-out binder full of material that's going to sit on a desk somewhere and never get utilized as your strategy. It needs to be simple. It needs to be easily communicated to the entire team. Stay strategic. Keep the conversation at a strategic level. Don't go into the tempting conversation about what you're going to do in Q1 and talk about tactics. That's for a later date. That's probably for different team members. You're building the strategic objectives that tactics will follow down the road. Focus the dialogue. You're taking your key team members out of the field for 2 whole days. I know what you're thinking. These are the folks that make the existing strategic objectives run. These are the folks that are most important, that the client-facing, that are conducting the strategic activities out in the field right now. Make that time worthwhile by focusing the dialogue and forcing the team members to deliver the end result, those strategic objectives. Begin with the end in mind. If you tell me that you want to work on a 6-week project, I'm going to ask you what annual goal does that support. If you tell me you have an annual goal in mind, I'm going to ask you what elements of your 3-year high-definition destination that supports. Because you always want to begin with the end in mind and then work backwards into what success looks like in the short term. Identify those critical leverage points, those things that you're going to affect that gives you the maximum impact with a minimal amount of effort. And at the end of the day, remember that simplicity beats complexity. And folks, I said it earlier, this is the toughest stuff you're going to do. You're going to take 2 days out to come up with your strategy for a 3-year time period. 2 days out to identify what you're going to accomplish in 2017. But if you do it right, that's going to build the alignment that's going to allow you to succeed from a strategic perspective. That's going to build the alignment that allow your team members in January to say, I'm not going to pursue this over here because that doesn't fit with our destination. You're providing them that clarity. And if you're wondering, is it really worth it? The market's changing so much. Should I really build out a 3-year plan? A couple questions for you. First of all, do you know what your annual objectives were in 2016? Did you achieve them? Can your team members easily recite what those objectives were? Do they know if they achieved them? If you can't say yes to every single one of those questions, then you need to build out an easily consumable strategy and plan for your organization.